initial grade for it, I think, was a C+, is what Entertainment Weekly gave it. They watched it again. The same exact critic would watch it, do a re-review of it, and it actually went to a B because they said, you know, we were actually pretty unfair with this. I think there were better parts of it. And now that I'm not trying to make it into something that it's not, it's actually a really good movie, and you should really see it. That being said, they can also go down. Many of the movies that we remember very fondly will go down. Mark my words. Avatar is one of those movies that a few years down the line, people are going to go back and watch and go, this movie sucks. Like, it's just awful. I don't even know what else to say about it. That's going to happen. Sorry about that, guys. I had to make a brief cut, first time ever in the Weekly Wringer, just because I had some really bad glare coming from the window over here, so I just wanted to rectify that before I kept going. Sorry to cut things so abruptly. Anyway, so moving on. The Onion Knight talked about Transformers. First person to talk about Transformers. All right, before I get into this, here's what I want to say. Many of you mentioned these movies. I think actually every single Transformers movie there's been so far, and I think there's only 3, except for the cartoon back in 1986, got mentioned in this. So all the Michael Bay ones, right? I've never seen any of these movies. And the reason that I've never seen any of these movies is because I am deathly afraid of how they're going to be, right? I am scared to death of how these movies are going to treat the Transformers that I grew up with and know and love. Now, does that make sense, guys? I think that makes sense, right? I've just been so afraid that they're going to mess with that vision that I haven't seen the film. So I haven't seen them. But that being said, I've heard varying degrees of they're okay. That's what I've heard. I haven't heard they're the greatest things ever. I haven't heard that they do a great job with the Transformers vision. I haven't heard that, man, this really continues the epic story. All I've heard is they're kind of okay. And Megan Fox is really hot. Megan Fox is really hot. But, I don't need to see Transformers to know that. So, I'm going to have to go with, I think that many of you that mentioned Transformers at this point, completely justified in doing so. I am 100% on board with the fact that, you can have something like Transformers that's source material, they make it into a movie, and all of a sudden you're just like, man, this sucks. This is so bad. Why is this happening? Why are they doing this? I'm so disappointed. Completely and totally understand that. Completely and totally agree. GRA 007 spoke about Batman and Robin. Now, I'm not going to go into the insanity of the mention of The Dark Knight. How one could be disappointed in that film is beyond me. And I know it got mentioned, but I'm not even going to bring it up. Well, I just did bring it up. I'm not going to expound on that fact. Batman and Robin is potentially the worst Batman movie of all time. It might just be the worst. I don't think I could think of a worse movie. There are so many different permutations of Batman at this point. It's just crazy. But I think the new Batman movies are very, very, very good. I think they do the best job at capturing the essence of Batman that's ever been done. I also think that the Michael Keaton version was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed that movie. But all of the sequels that kind of came after it, all the different reboots and all the different people, I just felt like it was just never right. It was never the way that it needed to be. That being said, I think the new Batman, starting with Batman Begins, really has it right. And Batman and Robin is probably the worst of all of those. So I did not see that in the theater, but if you saw that in the theater, I can imagine, oh my God, this is terrible. Anyway, no need to go on. I mentioned this a little bit prematurely, but I wanted to bring this up. Juris Consult mentioned the idea that things change over time with our disappointment. It's a funny thing, in other words. Completely agree. Completely agree. And I'm not just talking about the Entertainment Weekly reviews now. Think about some of those movies that you saw before that you thought were horrible, and you see them again, or someone makes you watch them, and you go, this isn't as terrible as the first time I saw it. and vice versa. I've done that many times. A movie that in the other direction, where I saw something that I really liked, saw it again, bought it on DVD. Man, this wasn't nearly as good as when I saw it in the theater. I think that is perfectly acceptable. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. Because the fact is, disappointment does change over time. Because disappointment has to do with our expectations. And we've talked about this 100 times before in different contexts, guys, in the Weekly Wringer, and we'll talk about it 100 more times. But expectations are very important when you go to enjoy something like art. No matter whether you are an aficionado, someone very familiar with the form, with the function, with the medium, with the source material, something like that. Any of those things. You can be a complete expert or a complete novice at every single thing I just said, and walk into something, and your enjoyment is going to be based in part on your expectation. However, we should say, and I firmly believe, that there are good and bad ways to do almost everything, and movie making and art in general is one of those things. There's good art and there's bad art. And if there aren't those things, then someone try to convince me that, the guy who knew secret kung fu is just as good as Star Wars. Because if you can do that, then I guess I don't have an argument there. Anyway, I just wanted to point out the fact that Juris Consult's absolutely right. Disappointment's a funny thing. It changes over time. And that being said, many of you might think of this a few years from now. Who knows? Clocktown. I haven't seen The Last Airbender since I saw it in the crappy theater. It was just terrible, blah, blah, blah. You watch it and you go, you know what? This is actually helping me to remember all those the great shows I enjoyed as a kid, right? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe you won't care at that point that there are some issues with the plot in the show and the source material and blah, 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 right? Maybe I'll go back and watch Captain America in a few years and go, yeah, you know what? I was maybe a little harsh on his image here. And I was really probably harsh on the actor here. And you just kind of go on and on with those things. I accept that will be the case. Tastes change, expectations change, therefore disappointment also changes. All right, another one I wanted to mention. Yoaru mentioned X-Men Origins Wolverine. I thought this was a good one because it got mentioned many other times down the list as one of the most disappointing ones out there. And I think this is a great case in point. So, first of all, Wolverine's probably always been my favorite X-Men character. Me and everybody else, right? But Wolverine was, really took over as the best X-Men character, the most popular, the one that everybody loved. And, everyone always thought, man, if they just made a movie about Wolverine. And X-Men started it, and, there was a lot of story about how he came to the X-Men. But not a real true origin story. And when that film came out, I didn't see it. I still haven't seen it. Because when I looked at it, I just said to myself, you know what? I don't think I'm going to like this. It's the same thing with Transformers. I had such a great image of Wolverine. Growing up, I had the cards. I collected comics. I did, I had the action figures. I collected all the games. I just thought, I love Wolverine. That I just thought this movie's not going to live up to it, and I'm really kind of scared as to what they do. Someday, someone will make a Halo movie, and I love Halo so much that I'll probably go and actually watch it. But I'm going to have the same aversion to it, guys, and I think you all relate to what I'm saying. Your expectations change everything. And lastly, I want to say something else. Drastic made a comment. And I thought this was really a great thought. Exposing 3D movies for what they really are. Guys, 3D is not a new ubiquitous technology that everyone's just going to love and it's the next evolution in films. It's not. I'm sorry, it's not, guys. It's not. The studios want you to believe that, but they're just wrong, right? How many of you have ever seen a 3D movie and thought, my goodness, this just would not have worked, or would not have worked at this level without this 3D stuff? Never! You've never seen that. I've seen movies that work in 3D. Here's my favorite. My favorite movie I've seen in 3D was How to Train Your Own Dragon. Saw it in 3D. It was a great movie, and it worked in 3D. But guess what? If I watched it on DVD in 2D right now, I would just get just as much enjoyment out of it as I did when I watched it in 3D. It adds nothing to the experience. Nothing. Nothing. Now, 3D TV, live 3D, that's a little different. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about movies, right? Films you see in the theater or on DVD. Drastic exposes 3D for what it is, which is just a way to get more money for a film, right? Avatar sold, and this is not supposed to be a rant on Avatar, this whole thing. Let's use something else. There are plenty of movies out there that have been retrofitted for 3D, and that's a joke, right? But let's talk about the movies that weren't, that were actually created for 3D. Created with 3D in mind right from the get-go. The process works a lot smoother. Generally, those tend to be a lot better in terms of implementation. But I got to tell you guys, it's just not there, right? The 3D doesn't add to the experience almost at all. It adds to the experience as much as your popcorn does. So you can go spend $10 on a tub of popcorn or $10 on a 3D ticket. It probably does about the same. And one, gives you 1,000 calories, and one, I guess, you can just feel bad about yourself about spending money on disappointing 3D movies afterwards. The point is, 3D implementation, even when it's good, is terrible. And, what I really liked about what Drastic said is explain the way that our brains work with translating the 2D, 3D thing. Fantastic. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. And I recently, so here's another interesting thing. I love the show Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman on the Science Channel. If any of you haven't checked that out, you definitely should. Makes you wonder why we don't teach science in school like we used to. But anyway, the point is, those shows are great. Do a fantastic job of bringing certain debates in current science to light to show that science is not linear. Nobody's just 100% right, but that there's a lot of things going on out there. Arguments, debates, politics. It's all out there. And I love that. But one of the things that I saw was about 3 dimensions and about there being more than 3 dimensions and when we would discover them. And one of the things that was interesting they brought up was this woman that could only see in 2D her entire life because she was born severely cross-eyed. Now, they fixed all that, but the issue was, by the time they had fixed it, you're supposed to learn how to be able to see in 3D at a very, very young age. So by the time you are a certain age, you become self-aware, you become aware of the world around you, and you can kind of interact with it, and you realize things have distance and heft and weight and things like that, right? This woman had never done that. And she started this rigorous training program when she was like 40 years old. And just kept going through it even though she wasn't seeing any results. And one day she jumped into the car and she sat down in the car and looked down at the steering wheel, and everything just popped. It just popped out, right? So it went from just being this thing that she saw on screen to just popping out. Now, did anything pop out? No. The steering wheel is always the same as it's always been whenever she was driving before, right? But the point is, guys, what Drastic was talking about is the 3D is what happens in your mind, right? What you're looking at is not even a real movie, right? It's not like you're not watching a video. You're watching a series of stills run in rapid succession, right? That's why they're called the motion pictures, because they're pictures that have the illusion of motion by virtue of... Anyway, I'm getting too deep in this, right? The point is, the illusion of the theater, the reason why we even buy any of that stuff to begin with is because our brains can translate that stuff into reality. We get lost in it because our brains see that content as open, livable, identifiable, 3D. I don't need somebody to throw crappy stuff at me through the screen to get a cheap laugh. They were doing that in theme parks 15 years ago, okay, in 3D. You don't need it. It was a gimmick then, and it's a gimmick now. Just the way I think about it, but I think Drastic really exposed it for what it is, and I wanted to say a big kudos there. So those are your contributions that I had written down. I also want to say a very good welcome to some of our new commenters for